23-year-old Nicole McLean had lived a self-confessed, normal life, growing up in the Australian state of Victoria. She was a former dancer and cheerleader in her teen years, before being drawn to the party scene of the early 2000s. When one of her friends began having boyfriend troubles, Nicole suggested that they take an overseas trip as a brief escape. The two chose to go to the Indonesian island of Bali for a holiday. Just 6 hours into their stay, Nicole's life would change forever.
Guys, this is horrendous. I've never seen anything like it. It's huge, it's scary. People are burnt everywhere. There's people dead.
This is the true story of the Bali bombings. This is lesser known history. On the 12th of October 2002, at approximately 11:05 PM, two suicide bombers attacked nightclubs in southern Bali, in the tourist district of Kuta. One of the terrorists made entry into a nightclub known as Paddy's bar with an explosive device hidden in his backpack. This device was then detonated, killing and injuring dozens instantly. Seconds later, a car bomb was detonated by a suicide bomber in a white Mitsubishi van parked outside of the Sari club across the street. This explosion was far more powerful than the first, causing immense damage to surrounding commercial and residential buildings. Simultaneously, a small bomb was detonated in the capital city of Denpasar outside the US consulate. However, it resulted in minor injuries to one person and very little property damage. Overall, the bombings left 202 people dead and 209 injured, marking the worst terror attack in Indonesia's history. The Indonesian Islamist group Jemaah Islamiyah perpetrated the bombings with financial backing from Al-Qaeda. The attack was motivated partially by the United States' global war on terror, which had been implemented in response to the September 11th attacks of the previous year, and what Jemaah Islamiyah perceived to be a growing Western influence in the region. Nicole and her friends had spent 45 minutes at Paddy's bar in Kuta. They'd been dancing and drinking with both locals and tourists from all over the world, enjoying the nightlife on their first day at the island. At 11:05, the first of the bombs went off in the bar. Nicole saw a bright, hot flash of light and felt something heavy hit her arm. She was knocked to the ground immediately and could hear people screaming and crying. Nicole could see that her arm was badly injured, still attached to her body but hanging on by skin. Her friend had managed to escape the blast and brought Nicole out through the front of the smouldering building. Smoke and dust filled the air, making it impossible to breathe. Across the street in the Sari club, the Sturt football team had been enjoying and celebrating their victory in the South Australian National Football League earlier in the month. The young men had spent the night drinking and dancing in the club, unaware that tragedy was moments away. The car bomb placed in the Mitsubishi van detonated shortly after the explosion in Paddy's bar, just outside the front entrance of the Sari club. The bomb was incredibly powerful, leaving a 1-meter crater in the ground and sending shrapnel and debris towards the patrons. Several players of the Sturt club were badly injured, requiring urgent and specialist burn treatment in the Australian cities of Darwin and Perth. Tragically, 2 members would lose their lives: Josh Deegan, aged 22, and Bob Marshall, trainer who was aged 68. Julian Burton, one of the players, suffered serious burns to his back. He felt himself thrown into the air once the bomb went off, before crashing into the rubble. Others, including many locals, suffered seriously horrific injuries. One Indonesian woman had shards of glass embedded into her eyes as she travelled past the car bomb. Thankfully, Australian doctors were able to save her sight. However, she still deals with the pain and discomfort as a result. The hospitals of the region were not equipped to deal with the sheer volume of injuries. The pools of nearby hotels and resorts were used to manage the pain of burn victims, and many, including Nicole and members of the Sturt Football Club, were flown south to Darwin and Perth for medical care. Nicole received immediate care at a hospital in Darwin, before being transported to Melbourne. Unfortunately, the wounds to her arm had become infected, and she was in serious danger of succumbing to illness in a weakened state. Despite all efforts, her arm had to be amputated. Thousands of people provided immediate aid and medical care to those affected by the bombings. The death toll could have been much higher had it not been for the army of volunteers that mobilized in the aftermath of the tragedy. Doctors from across the globe worked in supporting and treating the victims, who typically experienced burns and shrapnel-related injuries. All told, 202 people died from over 200 different countries, losing their life in the Bali bombings. The majority of the victims were from Australia, Indonesia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Over 30 people were arrested in relation to the attack, with 3 men, Amrozi bin Nur Hassim, Imam Samudra, and Huda bin Abdul Haq, sentenced to death in October 2008. They were executed by firing squad on the 9th of November 2008. Since the attack, anti-terrorism initiatives in Indonesia and Southeast Asia have aimed to reduce the likelihood of further terrorist incidents. Despite this, several attacks have been perpetrated by Jemaah Islamiyah in the years since the Bali bombings, although with decreasing frequency. In 2020, several arrests were made of high-ranking members of the group believed to be implicated in carrying out the attacks in Bali. Today, many nations around the world pause on the 12th of October each year to commemorate the lives lost in the 2002 Bali bombings. The Indonesian government constructed a stone monument after the attacks where Paddy's bar once stood, listing the names of all 202 victims who perished that day. Despite the tragic loss of life, the Bali bombings have proved to be a demonstration of the strength of the human spirit, with many of the injured victims, such as Nicole McLean, continuing to lead fulfilling and inspirational lives to this day. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. This is Lesser Known History.